I am out here with Mr. Greg Robertson from the Underpin Mental Sports Performance Partner. This is an interview that I've going to really enjoy doing, actually, and asking you about that side of the game and your role. For all of the guys and girls watching, first of all, what is Underpin and what is your role there? And how have you seen that part of mental performance within the game of golf, especially in other sports, sort of progress over the last couple of years?
Underpin is a mental performance coaching company. We predominantly work with golfers, elite level, amateurs that are wanting to get through to the professional ranks. Maybe they might be in America at the moment, finishing off their collegiate career, I suppose. And then obviously pros, through new pros playing on clutch to existing tour players. The mental side, I think, has probably been quite prominent in the professional game for a while at the top level, but probably a little bit of a hidden secret, I think. But more latterly, it's much more open. Players are coming out talking about it. More public profile players talking about getting mental help. It's a very, very mental game, as we know. And there's not much separates these players that we're seeing this week, technically. But it's probably more how they cope mentally and what their experience is of competing.
I think it's really interesting from someone who I played the game before, and I would always say throughout my career that was probably the thing that let me down the most in terms of the mental side of the game. I think it's quite interesting when you look back through the years of golf, sort of Tiger Woods steps on the scenes in the late 90s and the different stages of that golf has been through. You've got the gym stage where, previously to that, there was no one in the gym. But then the stage that we're seeing now is fully based around this mental performance and how big a part of the game that has become. If you look back 40, 50, even 30, even as close as 20 years ago, it really wasn't a massive part of the game. Everyone just sort of thought they've either got it or they don't mentally. But now, is it something that you think it's a workable skill? And I always think that's the interesting thing, is that you can take a player who thinks, I'm really mentally strong and I'm really mentally well prepared. But is your job more, yes, that might be the case, but do you see it as a skills process that you can get better at doing that? And is that sort of what your job is, to try and get that out of players?
Yep, you're right. And talking about Tiger, I think he had a more well-rounded package of training and coaching in terms of tuition. So I know his dad brought in a military mental psychologist, I think, probably from a young age, single figures, to help Tiger keep grounded and present and focused. And the zone he talks about, experience that for longer periods or notice as quicker than most when he's out of that. Make the situation that might not have gone in his favour last no more than it needs to do, the repercussions of that mentally, the ripples, if you like. He was famously quoted about walking so many steps and then he'd move on. So just dealing with that. And I don't think so I think that was well ahead of time. And that was a military thing from his father, where military personnel are under incredible stress. So I know, for example, for the fire service do promote things like mindfulness training, meditation, breathing. They have to control their breathing under pressure because they'll run out of oxygen. In golf, it's not quite as obvious a threat, but our brains don't detect or don't understand the difference between a threat, a perceived threat, and what's a real threat. So our brains can function in the same way as a fireman or woman entering a building that's on fire versus a clutch moment in golf. So I think the skills can be learned to create more awareness of what you're actually experiencing and what you can then do to bring yourself back to a calmer state to then complete a round or start a round.
For sure.
People experience it in different ways. Some people are talking to me about, I can't start fast. I almost waiting to make a bogey or something like that to then get a round going, or conversely, they get a round going and then they start to project forward and potentially tighten up, get more protective. So we're all experiencing golf and life in a different way. So players on clutch that are working with ourselves, they are opening up and sharing their experience of competing, and we're helping them to create a more fulfilling relationship with the sport, with their profession. So that it becomes more about what they're scoring, but what are they learning, and what is their experience like when they're competing.
I think I don't want you to give away all your secrets on camera, because I know that you have players on the clutch that you work with, but is the overall, is it hard to state something that isn't an overall message, because it's not the same for everyone? Everyone is so individualistic. Is your approach to dive into that individual player and go, obviously, what works best for them, and then you have to make a plan around their own personality, their own mental traits, all of this, and create an individual program around that individual player for them to perform their best? Or is it more a widespread approach that this generally works for everyone?
There are some general skills you can learn that we can all apply in our own way, but I think ultimately you're right, it's about the individual and what works for them. So we're not trying to create clones that are out there floating around the golf course, not experience any emotion at all. Some players are more outgoing, expressive players and need to get that out. Some are more insular, and some things might be going on, but it's just building and brewing up inside them. So there's a definite bespoke approach to each player. I think there's definitely common themes and definitely skills that they can all learn that we're just not taught in the society from a young age. You've got to go seek it out at this point. But it's highly individual. And players coming off a course yesterday, for example, me just asking a simple question of, well, what do you do when you're doing this really well? Or how did it go today? And how does that compare to when you were putting really well? And what was the difference? And then just within a few minutes, you've got, I forgot to do this vital element of when I put well, I am seeing the ball rolling into the hole. But it's hard to conjure that up yourself sometimes, coach yourself, because you're in your own jar, you can't read your label. So I facilitate that kind of discussion around that, and that's just one element of it. But there's so many different elements to this game, as you know.
I think one of the really tough things, or do you think one of the really tough things about the game of golf is that it's not a reactive sport. And that's what I always thought was really hard about it, is that, one, you're on your own out there. Yes, you can have a team around you, your caddy, guys like you that are there as a team, but at the end of the day, it's you, the golf ball, and the golf course, and a lot of variable factors that are completely out of your control. But is it the staticness of golf that makes it such a hard sport, that the ball is just sitting there, dead still? There's nothing there that can, it's not moving around. There's no, do you know what I mean? It's, yes, we're trying to make it reactive, or that's sort of how I used to think. It's like, how can I make this a reactive sport? But at the end of the day, the ball's just sitting there, whereas on the tee, on the ground, which makes it so hard, because to anyone from the outside, it should be so easy. The ball's not moving, it's just sitting there. I always think that's a hard hurdle to get over in golf. Is that sort of, how do you preach that sort of idea to your players?
You're right. I think in most sports, there is a pause at some point. So even in tennis, between sets, before a serve. So golf is unique, but it's not totally unique. I think what makes it unique is probably the time in between. These guys hitting it so far, there's a long walk. Yeah. And if that's offline and it's potentially in danger and they're stewing on that all the way up to there, it gives, our minds don't want to settle in the present moment. They want to be off to the future or in the past. Yeah. So I think where golf lends itself to that, if you're not in control of that, is you can get so far ahead of yourself or not move on from something that's just happened. So it's the time, I think, for me. It's what you do with that time. And I think at this level on clutch, I do see some caddies out here, probably not paid professionals, although some may be former professional golfers themselves, or have good experience. I think what makes it more easier for someone with a caddy is you do get into the shot if you're talking through it.
Yes.
So but for generally out here, you need to be your own caddy. So arriving at the ball, working through a shot that you would with someone as a professional, it's more difficult here to do that yourself. But I think that process of working through a shot, figuring it out, is something that's in the present moment now. And a good caddy would help the player to be very clear on what they're actually doing. Out here, at this level, you've got to be that job. You've got to be caddy and player together. You've got to be your own caddy.
Yeah.
And probably out here, you've got someone carrying the back rather than an experienced caddy/coach, which, I mean, they play all sorts of roles, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. The players that you see here on Clutch, you know, the dream for every player here is to play at the highest levels of the game. Obviously, they wouldn't be here if they didn't have that dream. We all had that. I had that dream when I was a kid that you want to get to the highest levels of the game. Is there steps that you see that actually are necessary that you have to take in that mental performance path to actually get there? You know, it's not that you can be very skilled, be very talented, have a great golf swing, all of this, but at the end of the day, like you said in the very first thing, this is a game of mental strength and preparation, and it does come down to a lot of that, you know, the errors that you make here. Do you think that there's a big difference from the guys that are playing at the top levels of the game and the teams that they have around them in this department compared to the development levels of the game and the steps they have to take to actually get there?
Yeah, I think supreme high levels of competency exist on this tour. There are some outliers that are exceptionally good at ball striking, everything else. But probably to succeed, confidence needs to match that. You could still have a lower level of competency, but if your confidence is matching that or higher, then you might see, that's why you see people who maybe not strike it as well from the eye, but actually score and get round and progress. That's definitely true on the main tour as well. So I think that depends on where confidence is being built from. Particularly in golf, it's very easy to couple yourself with your craft, with your golf, so that there's no separation. And for you to be confident, you need to be striking it well, hitting it well, driving it well, putting well, chipping well, to be fit. And actually, those things are quite transient. They do come and go. We can wake up one day feeling completely different in someone else's body. We do. That's the sort of human characteristic. So what I help people do is create more stable confidence from more solid foundations. So in other words, they know they've got their own back in any situation on the golf course. So if they don't have it technically, they can still get round.
Yes.
And not panic or go looking for things in the wrong place when things haven't quite worked out.
And do you think that that's really important? Because at this level of the game, there's a lot of, and what I see looking at this level of the game is that a lot of players can go out there. All of these guys out there can shoot 8, 7 under par, and they can do it on a given day. But it's the consistency level of doing that, not shooting 8 under par every day, but the consistency level of playing well over 4 days, but then taking that consistency level to over 3 weeks, and then doing it over 6 weeks. And that's what the best guys in the world are doing, is that they have these underlying things that they can go back on and rely on in terms of mental performance, that they know that over a longer period of time, I can perform averagely better than I would, previously. Is that sort of how you would see your role as being, is that you're trying to develop these players to make them better over not just a single day, but over a longer period of time?
Yeah. The internal work that the top players are doing is hidden from view. Mental toughness is not about maybe how it's perceived, about sort of surface level positivity. That just doesn't stack up and hold up under pressure. It's actually having a plan for when things don't work out, but also working on themselves away from the golf course in ways such as mindfulness, meditation. The things we train our bodies, we train our golfing technique. But I think that there's also the inner work that needs to be done to allow all of that to come out, when it really matters. And if you've not done any of that inner work, you might get away with it, and perform when you've got your game. But then if that starts to, it's just not as solid as if getting around level par, 1 or 2 under on a day where you've felt a bit off. But you've managed to not panic, bring yourself back, and just deal with whatever it is there and let it unfold rather than try and force things. So I think that's the secret. There isn't any secret sauce, but I think the secret to mental strength is not in the way that we might perceive, sort of in terms of hard physical training and toughness. It's actually very soft skills, being kind to yourself, being aware of what you are feeling, what you're experiencing, knowing when your heart rate's elevated, and how to bring that down in a calm way, not through more thought, but through more use of senses.
Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It really has. Really, really interesting. If I had taken any of this on board, I might not be sitting here and still have the opportunity to be out playing. But it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you for all that you do for the tour and being a partner of the tour. We greatly appreciate everything that you do.